Guys, I want to welcome you to another episode of the Advisory Board podcast, where we focus on franchising and business needs and try to get experts involved that can give us actionable advice that can help our franchise systems operate better. To that end, I've got with me a friend of mine, Douglas Mark, and he's with Learning Zen. Doug, and I'm going to pitch it to you in a second, have you tell them more about you, but let me give a brief intro. He's been so interesting. Fun fact about Douglas: when right after 9/11, he was involved in a project where his company was, where they developed an LMS for FAA safety for private pilots that needed to learn how to, manage some of the new rules, regulations, etc. And that spun off into Learning Zen shortly thereafter, where they built this platform out where people can learn online. And I'm an L&D guy. So back in the day, there weren't a lot of platforms where people can learn. There's like one big boy, Saba, and then there were a couple of others that were dabbling, but there just weren't as many options back then. So Douglas has been in the industry for 25 years. He's been in franchising for 15 years because they realized that rather than focus on everything, they should narrow their focus on what they were excellent at, and that was multi-unit. So they've been focusing on franchising for 15 years now, Douglas?
Yeah, just hit our 15th year. It was really exciting. We love the space.
Awesome. Well, so two fun things about you, then I'll let you tell them a little bit more about you and Learning Zen. But Douglas's dad was a musician, a jazz musician. He recorded with Johnny Cash. Music's been a big part of his life, and he mastered during COVID. Some of us were like eating too much and binging Netflix. Well, he was mastering and producing a rock album with a friend in Australia. So I give you my friend and rock star, sort of ish, producer of rock stars. Douglas, tell us a little bit more about you and about Learning Zen.
Yeah, Dave, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. And kudos to you. I do one of these as well. So these are kind of fun interviews, but you're so dang natural at it. So I'm going to first compliment my host and go from there. But yeah, so, I've been at Learning Zen for about almost 16 years now. And we mentioned that we've been in franchising for about 15 years, but we kind of have an interesting story in the sense of like how we got started. And you did an awesome job kind of talking about the space. When I was originally in the learning and development space, I actually happened to work for Saba, one that you mentioned, and there just wasn't a lot of players at that time. There was, Cornerstone and Canvas and a few others, but not a ton of systems out there, and certainly nothing that was, SaaS-based product or nothing that a small to mid-sized business could get into. So I always felt like for franchising, it's great if you were an established brand, you could probably afford a learning management system, but boy, if you were an emerging brand, like good luck getting into, a learning management system that you could afford, let alone that you could manage without, hiring a full-time employee to do that. And so we kind of took notice of those two things. And we said, well, with multi-units and with franchising, that, reproducibility and duplication of efforts is a big thing because we need every franchise location to kind of operate like that first one that we opened. And I think you can't naturally get there unless there is some training of your systems in every location. There's got to be, that component of what the owner needs to know, but then also what the employees need to know and how to represent the brand. And also what is your culture? And I always find it interesting to talk to businesses who maybe don't have any real training materials today. And I'm like, well, how are you, imparting your culture into your locations and things like that? And so we knew this was a really important thing. So we just said, let's build a SaaS-based version of a learning management system that is really easy to administer, but more importantly, it's really easy to create engaging online training content. So we tend to work with the franchisor brand because they want to help create the actual training materials that they'll disseminate to the franchisee and then down to the employees. And it's just a space that we adore, man. It's been this community. I mean, everybody's really kind of open and willing to give away their time and kind of, mentor you along the way. And I find myself doing the same thing. And I got to say, that's one of the most rewarding things I do is kind of mentoring new suppliers in this space.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I mean, compared to you, quite a bit newer as a supplier in the space still. So, and I've appreciated that same thing. And I used to think the whole franchise fam thing was like just kind of just like a PR slogan someone's throwing out. It's a legitimate thing, but the skeptic in me thought it was a bunch of BS when I first got in the space because I'd never been in an industry where people cared enough to. I've had lunch with several people that some would call my competitors, and I'm like, it doesn't matter. Like, there's a big blue ocean out there. We can all work together, and frankly, we all need to collaborate to try to get the people who are doing it wrong to do it right. And if it's with me, great. If it's with you, great. But let's lift the ships. And and everyone's kind of on board with that approach, which I really like.
Yeah, it was an odd thing for me to get used to as well. My previous industry wasn't, necessarily like this. And so I would go to the conferences, and what I realized was it almost didn't even matter whether I had a booth or not. What mattered was whether I was at the social events, at night, and was I making connections, like real connections,
Mhm.
but it was over a few cocktails, or it was over dinner, or it was, maybe non-traditional. But man, once you start making some connections in this, franchising industry, you realize it is a big family, and it's possibly dysfunctional at times, but it's also very heartwarming, and I love the fact that the connections that I've made are going to be probably friends for life, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I feel the same way, honestly.
Yeah,
Well, let's shift because I think we could riff for quite a while about how much we like this industry. But
yeah.
instead of doing that, why don't we just provide some great context for our friends in the industry? So let me ask you this: so you've been around for a long time, but currently things have shifted a lot in learning and development and training. What would you say are some of the big challenges that you guys see on a regular basis that are shaping this ecosystem for training and learning right now?
Yeah, I really love that question, because it's obviously top of mind as we're, researching competitors, researching how to make our product better, and also researching how to better support the franchising community. For us, that meant, bringing on a franchise advisory committee that helps us, build new functionality that really supports the franchising industry. And that was a really important one for us internally. When I think externally, how we work with franchisors and franchisees, one thing that we think is really important, but maybe doesn't get addressed a lot, is that the franchisors often become really obsessed with creating operational based training for, maybe the employee level. But it's really easy to kind of forget that these owners probably don't have a business background, or often don't have a business background, right? They're entrepreneurial, right? But they're not entrepreneurs. They want to follow a blueprint. And part of the blueprint expectation, I think, for a franchisee is, hey, there's going to be a great training program, built in that I can leverage to train my staff. But hopefully there's also some training materials built for that franchisee, how to read a P&L, how to hire the right people, how to manage a team. Like, these are things that maybe we don't think about as traditional training. It's not necessarily how to take an order. It might not, generate direct revenue, but it's an investment in that franchisee. And we forget sometimes, I think, that we're signing a 10-year marriage agreement, with these franchisees, and we're going to collect royalties for 10 years. So investing in the franchisee, making sure that they're really well trained, to me, sounds like a really obvious, business decision to make, but you would be surprised how many franchisors maybe don't invest in their franchisees. So that's kind of a wow factor for me. And you were also kind of going down this avenue of talking a little bit about, technology changes that we're seeing in this space. And this is something that's really hot button, and you see this a lot too. I actually sat in on your demonstration a couple of months ago, and I was pretty wowed by the franchise functionality that you built into your product.
Mhm.
And also just how user friendly it was leveraging technology, right?
Yeah.
You're sitting there talking to me, and next thing you know, I've got a text message from you, and I've got a video inside of it. So we're
Mhm.
using cool technology, and Learning Zen's the same way really any learning products should be. But there's these things out there now that are called easy authoring tools.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
easy authoring tools are really leveraging the power of AI. And I pause. I know everybody's, going bananas, right, for AI. Everything's AI right now. And I
Yeah.
can, get rid of 3 employees, just get me some AI. That's not entirely true, but it is going to help you save some time on certain things. AI tools can be really good at writing you an outline, or
Yeah.
writing you a video script for how to teach your employees how to upsell. And so we've been looking for tools that, integrate nicely with Learning Zen, because we're a firm believer that you can't be all things to all people. And if we were to build in every piece of new functionality that a franchise brand brought to us, the system would be part HR, part CRM, part learning, part onboarding, part, surveys, right? And we
Right.
wouldn't do anything well. And so we really made this conscious decision to say, hey, we're going to stay focused on the platform and do it really well. We have an awesome partner, who's an instructional designer, and her name is Rachel Shell. I'm totally name dropping in the middle of this thing, but RAS Personalized, like she's got, 2 master's degree in instructional design, and she's got her entire learner focused framework that she built. It's, I would say, something that's designed for today's learners, but we tried to get ourselves to build the right partner network so we didn't have to be all things to all people. So if we stay focused on the platform, I can integrate an easy authoring tool into Learning Zen, but if I created it, maybe it's not going to be as good as the one that existed.
Yeah.
The same reason I have other partners in this space. I mentioned the fact that like I partner with Architect Maestro, and I think they're an interesting sort of disruptive piece of technology because they are what I would call a business intelligence tool or a franchise all-in-one platform that allows you to pick best in class applications. And if you're a client tether user now and you switch to where am I going to go with this? Salesforce, later on, I wouldn't go that way, by the way. I'd go the other direction.
That'd be a shame. Yeah.
That would be a bad idea, but their platform would support that. Whereas, other all-in-one platforms, you're tied to whatever that tool is. Well, that's great if they are awesome at everything, but it's really hard to be awesome at everything. So we try to stay focused on really the Learning Zen platform and making it simple for people to create engaging e-learning content.
Oh yeah. Well, I think of that, like we'll riff on that for a second. I want to backtrack and talk about, you mentioned a couple of really important things we're going to discuss today. So thanks for the outline. But a lot of those all-in-one platforms that are trying to be an LMS and a CRM and whatever, right? They're never that great. Have you ever bought like an appliance that did 7 things?
Right.
It didn't do any of them well. It's like, well, that was an air fryer and a toaster and a microwave and a dishwasher. You're like, what? No.
Is it good at any of them?
No. You remember how like years ago they came out with the thing that was a washing machine and a dryer? I was like, oh, this is going to be great. Do you see those for sale anymore? No.
Not anywhere besides Europe.
Yeah. How about the old like camper trucks from Volkswagen? No. Like
yeah.
Because people are like, well, I need a car and I need a camper. Let's separate those. So let's talk about a couple of things that you talked about, though, because that's really the focus of our discussion today is how do we help franchise systems learn how to improve their learning and development? And you mentioned 3 things that I want to focus on right now. One, why do they need training programs? Why should they automate them? We'll dig into that in a minute. But one of the things you said that was really interesting to me, and it made my head spin for a second, because I've been in L&D. I worked for Pearson. I helped localize learning and development for years after that as well. But I don't know, like 10 years or so in learning and development that I've spent. So like I've seen it develop and change. I've seen effective pedagogy. I can use that word effectively. Like I help people design courses. Like I've been in it. So, but you talked about there's a large focus on the ground level operations training. Like, hey, we run a Burger King. We need to have training for all of our people to cook the fries the same way and make the burgers the same way and prepare the dressing the same way and like we clean the restaurant the same way. And yet there's not a lot of focus on training the franchise owners. There's a funny thing about that, right? Because all franchise systems at the franchisor level are grossly understaffed because they don't have enough royalty revenue coming through to pay the bills for more people. So they scrimp and they save and they try to create scale. Well, here's an interesting opportunity, franchisors, that maybe you're not thinking about as you're building content. Creating the content for the franchisees helps the franchisees deploy your model a little better. But you're actually creating an overhead burden on yourself as you grow and expand that you're not going to be able to service because you're not creating automated self-learning content portals for your franchise owners. So it's funny because an investment in franchise training content for franchisees actually reduces the workload and burden on the franchisor to take care of and make sure they're replicating similar results across every location from the franchisees, the franchise owners. Tell me how you've seen that play out a little bit in your career.
Yeah, and I love the avenue that you went down on this because, not only are they, getting them better trained to better understand their systems, but they're probably generating more revenue. The franchisors that are investing in their franchisees, if they can take a look at that and see, well, what's the training doing from a performance level? And can I cross-reference that against revenue numbers and find out lo and behold, the franchisees that we're investing in are, producing more revenue, and that comes back as more royalties. And so I think it's kind of an obvious connection, but it's one that they really easily missed. And
sorry
don't you think
to
there's
cut you off for a
No,
second.
go ahead.
Like, think about what's happening here, guys. Like, look at the levers you're trying to pull and the lines on your P&L. If you can increase your royalty line item and at the same time reduce your overhead burden, like, what's happening here? You see that gap in between my hands? If you're watching the video, yeah, like, you're creating gap, you're creating margin and cash. And that's something that everybody's trying to figure out how to do more. But that's why I think learning and development's always looked at like, oh, it's an expense.
Yeah.
And yet it's really an investment that's going to produce heavy dividends.
Heavy dividends. I mean, I had a demonstration the other day where someone went through and we had this exact same conversation. They were like, no offense to you, but training is an expense. And for me to book appointments, service appointments, that's a revenue generator. And I'm like, it is. But in order to book the appointments, do they need to be trained? And in order to fulfill the appointment, they need to be trained. And so I think there's this level of you're absolutely right that we see it as an investment or an expense. And I think we've got to figure out, well, hopefully soon people will start to realize, this is a true investment that we're making right now, let alone the disconnect between franchisor and franchisee. So, there's kind of a natural friction often between franchisor and franchisee. And we hear it told in our space all the time, right? The franchisors think the franchisees are lazy and aren't following the system, or the franchisee thinks the franchisor doesn't care about them, and they don't listen to my suggestions and they don't give me the right materials I need to be successful. And I think this naturally breaks down those barriers and those walls a little bit. If the franchisee is clearly seeing the franchisor, they're heavily invested in your success. They've created these courses to help you be a better owner, not just, better at, teaching someone how to cook, the fries for 90 seconds. It's more, they're invested in your future. And I think that goes a long way. As a guy who talks to a lot of franchisees, I honestly, Dave, I've been trying to solve this problem for 15 years. Almost. Like, so you're is a hot button like item for me. So I'm glad that we're talking about it, because this is kind of the riddle in this space a little bit, I feel like, which is the disconnect between franchisor and franchisee. And I do feel like the more that we invest in that franchisee, the better the natural relationship is going to be between the two parties.
Yeah, you know what I think you should do? I've got advice for you, Douglas. You should just do a revenue share model and say, look, it's going to cost you nothing to use my platform, but what's going to happen is we're going to help you deploy successfully, and then that growth on your bottom line, I get half of it. And
done. Thank you.
You'd make so much more money, dude, if you did that. Yeah. And everyone would be like, sure. And then at the end of the day, they'd be like, oh, wow, that's an expensive learning management system. We should just pay them his normal price. Yeah. Anyway, sorry for the squirrel moment there, but there's a huge opportunity here for that. But let's talk. And you talked about culture too. So we're going to come back to the first item, but you also talked about culture. And if you are not actively working on culture, culture is actively working on you, meaning it's organically developing, it's turning into its own beast. And a lot of times it's the loud few, the overwhelmingly loud minority that are creating the culture for you. So how have you seen people, franchisors successfully leverage learning systems, learning content, LMS technology to create a system that's starting to develop and reinforce culture?
Yeah, I do you see me like engaging like back and forth as we're having this conversation? It's because I get really excited about these topics clearly, but you're sparking a memory I have of bumping into a Joe and the Juice. I don't know if you've ever been to one of those franchise locations or not, but they've got a picture on their wall. At least the one in Bethesda, Maryland that I go to is a picture on the wall that just says "Culture Eats Strategy for Breakfast." Yeah. And I took a picture of it and I just kind of loved it, right? And it's something that I look at, fairly often, because I think culture plays a huge part of training. It's massive. And it's often why people sort of buy into a brand to begin with, is they like the culture and they like the experience that they had there. And in order to get that in all of your locations is really hard, because I don't think it's organically flowing through operational based training. I think it's got to be taught to that particular owner. And so culture training becomes really important. And we also have to, really think about the audience that's going to absorb these training modules, right? And we really need to kind of think about, what's going to resonate with them. And so, it starts with doing some initial upfront analysis. But maybe you find out that the majority of your employees are, 16 to 25 years old, and, they spend 30% of their day, looking at social media, and they love Instagram and TikTok and things like that. Well, if that's your staff and that, then I would really encourage people to create training videos that matches their expectations and their wants and their needs and their kind of desires. And it measures both adult learning principles as well as kind of understanding, I think today social media plays a part in how we deliver materials. And there's a moment of edutainment that has to be put into your training materials. They don't want to just sit back and watch a video of how to do one thing. They kind of expect to be entertained, and they want it to be short bite-sized chunks. And, they don't have the patience to sit through a 15-minute video.
Yeah, no, you're
but
right.
There's a mind-blowing stat out there that I love to drop. And what it is that like video is retained 60,000 times faster than reading text.
60,000 times?
Yeah, so I did a video on my social channel for this once, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, let's figure that out. And so I said, well, if I could mow my lawn 60,000 times faster than I mow it today, being 30 minutes, how fast would that be me mowing my lawn? And I'm gonna sort of fall on my sword and say I don't remember the actual number because I'm not crunching those numbers today, but I believe it was something like 0.3 of a second I'd have my lawn mowed. And so it's mind-blowing, right? To see how much information can get pushed out through video-based training. So we love the notion of embracing video learning, but today's learners, as adult learners, they consider other things, right? They're like, well, they consider, I've learned all of this stuff in the past, and now I'm being taught something new. Well, I care about the why behind what you're telling me to do. And so I think if we're taking into consideration these things when we're building out a training program to support the franchisee, which in turn will be used to, support the unit level employees, I think all of these things kind of fit together. The analysis is important, of certainly of what needs to be taught, but also what kind of learners do we have? How do they learn? And we need to remember that adult learners are a little bit different than, our K through 12 learners, where explaining why something done is really important. I think people forget about that a ton.
Yeah, start with why. I've got a couple of thoughts I want to lay on top of what you just said there, because you laid out a bunch of important things. I'm going to emphasize a few as well, because I want everyone to remember these things. One, and it's funny because I've been brought in to train CEOs on how to build effective sales and marketing strategies before. I've been professional coaching, and a lot of, and not a lot anymore, I don't have time for it right now, but consulting work with businesses, helping them scale and grow. It's what I love. And the strategy behind selling is what made it alluring to me. And I also realized that you don't have to be a schmuck to be in sales. Like, in fact, those are the ones that usually have to bounce industry to industry. They don't succeed long-term, even though they might make a lot of money one year. But there's something about what you're saying that aligns super well with almost everything in life, which is you need to understand the audience. If you're selling, marketing, or if you're creating learning content, this is where the research is important. And you need to evaluate, like, who are my people? Like, if you're running I'll talk about Thomas Scott for a second with his home run franchise system, right? They're recruiting younger folks. You can see in the content that he's building, because he knows they actually are really hardworking, and they're willing to work harder than your average middle-aged dude or gal, because they're trying to prove themselves, right, in their own way. So like, he's got his audience focus. So his content, even though when we would look at it as middle-aged men, we were like, really, Thomas? Like, that's kind of choppy and sloppy, but it's actually the right for his audience. And so I just want to pick on him because he's intentionally doing that. He's not being sloppy. He's creating content that aligns with the content that's being consumed by his core audience. And I've got this background of Flaming Gorge, fishing. Like, if you're going fishing, you have to know the species you're going after, and you have to know what they consume look like.
Yes.
Consume, if you're going fly fishing, you got to use the right fly that's in hatch at that time on the river, or else nothing's going to bite your lure. And you think about learning content, even sales, it's the same metaphor. You have to understand, what are we going after? I'm training franchise owners. They're between the ages of 29 and 43, and this is what they're interested in. This is what they're consuming today. So they spend a lot of time watching, TikTok, YouTube shorts, whatever. Like, their attention spans have shrunk so much in the last 10, 15 years. It's insane. So you can't have courses that are 20 minutes long.
You can't.
Bite-sized learning snippets, right? Like, so, but make the bait, the learning content, mirror what they're currently consuming, and it won't be a chore, and it won't require a lot of emotional energy for them to go through the training. They'll consume it naturally. Does that make sense?
It makes a ton of sense. And and I love what you said there. I think it was really going to resonate with, the L&D community right now, because I mean, the days of sitting down and watching a 20-minute video are over. Obviously micro learning is a big thing, and nano learning, right, is becoming a big thing. And so the days of teaching like a course on, let's even, use an example of a restaurant where we're going to say, okay, you're a server, so you need to take the server course. Those days are done. You're going to take a bunch of individual bite-sized chunks that you absorb, and, that course number 1 is how to greet the customer, and that's it. And I'm going to teach, you're going to master that though, which is kind of nice as well. And what's kind of interesting too is that, there's kind of a system as well that's, supporting learners. So when they do master a course, they do get a certificate, and their manager gets notified. And that's something that I feel like really resonates with today's learners, maybe more so than you or I. But today's learners like that sort of recognition component too. Yep. And it's a big deal, but they're getting all these small little wins along the way. They don't have to sit through a course for 2, 3, 4 days to get through it. It's like 10 minutes later, you've got a win, you've got an attaboy, a congratulations, you're feeling good about yourself, and you're kind of ready to take that next bite-sized chunk. And I'm going to bring this back to what you were just talking about before with your client, which is, they're over there kind of creating, I mean, I'm going to quote you and say choppy and sloppy, because I love the term, first of all. Like, that's because honestly, like, choppy and sloppy is something that resonates with today's learners. And if you're not building your training content for today's learners, you're not actually supporting those employees at the, end unit level. And with choppy and sloppy, you can turn the camera on yourself and record yourself. And every time you record yourself, and that gets down to the franchisee level, that's culture getting pushed down. And that's awesome. And if you're not afraid to get in front of that camera and flub up a little bit, I tell people this all the time, like, it's going to be ugly when you start. Like, you got to, here's at the end of the deal, you got to suck before you can be bad. And you got to be bad before you can be okay. And you got to be okay before you can be good. And so it takes a little bit of time to kind of get in there and get used to recording these things. But you don't have to pay a high-end production company to create your materials. You can do this yourself now. I mean, the video authoring tools that are out there right now, the easy authoring tools in particular, I mean, anybody, if you can add an attachment to an email, you can create an engaging, training content video. So I am 100% positive of this.
I love what you just said. You have to suck before you can be bad. I just finished in my head, like, you got to be bad before you can be good. You got to be good before you can be great. The funny thing though is that people are consuming such poor quality content now, like grainy videos, terrible camera mechanics, like it's so bad. And like when what is it, 7, 8 years ago? Remember when like this became a thing? Like, everyone was like, I'm holding my camera out, and like the long arm camera view where it's like a selfie video, and people are like the hustle porn guys, like, I'm at the gym, it's 4:30 in the morning, I'm going to Stella at night. Do you think I don't think so. Like, these guys, I think it was stupid. And I was like, are you serious right now? Like, who's consuming your content? Then I realized everybody kind of liked the authenticity of it. And so, so I started doing it because, like, well, if I can't beat them, I'm going to join them. And then I realized that people really liked the authentic content. They didn't need high production quality value. And so I think that was my time at Pearson that spoiled my brain and made me think everything had to be a $40,000 video.
Right. Mine too. Yeah. I was spoiled the exact same way, and so when I got into this space and we started doing what I call kind of DIY, we really coach people how to DIY their training programs.
Yeah.
And what I realized was that authenticity was the key, 100%. And so I actually, I'm going to lean over real quickly. So I think like if you were to buy a gimbal, so I've got a gimbal here, right? And so I don't know if you've used one of these before, but like if you want a gimbal, I've got a ring light. I happen to have a decent microphone.
Yeah.
But like if you have that, you've got a setup. You're ready to go. I mean, you really don't need to spend a whole bunch of money to get, high-end recording done. Put a ring light on, flip your camera around, have a decent microphone. You're in good shape. You can actually create engaging content and you get to be your authentic self. So, don't go get dressed up to deliver training content to a bunch of 16 to 20-year-olds. Like you don't need to wear a suit to that. If you're at home and you love I'm a hoodie guy. Like my team knows this about me. Like my uniform is a hoodie, a Learning Zen cap, pants because it's freezing in my basement. But that like helps me be me. Yeah. And so whether I'm creating a Loom video for a client that I'm sending off, or whether I'm having a team meeting, or you and I are having this conversation, I'm almost always in the same thing. And it's usually a shirt like this and a sweatshirt. That's the only difference.
I love to like get outside. I'm a pretty active guy. Coaching baseball, that's ended, but we were outdoors all the time. So about 100 yards away from this cliff, in my background on Zoom, if you're just listening to the podcast, I've got Flaming Gorge right behind me. It's this cliff right off the edge. It's about a 250-foot fall. It's a beautiful view. But I was there and I was like, you know what? I have thoughts when I'm out like wandering in the woods. So I'll stop and I recorded a video for some clients. And I do that kind of stuff all the time. I was at a client conference down in the what was that called? The Secret Mountains, just outside of Phoenix. My wife and I went hiking right before we caught a flight home, and it was awesome. But as I was at the top, I was like, I got an idea. So sometimes I think using your environment to create content is also a very good way to create authentic content that also resonates with people. They don't want every video to be you like sitting in the basement with with your perfect lighting. Sometimes go stand. I've created content from the roof of my house. I live in Utah. The mountains are like 2 miles over there, and like it's an interesting background. And so the animated GIF that I use as the video thumbnail, people are interested to see what the heck's Dave doing. It looks like he's on the roof. Like, so anyway, I would recommend that as well. Use the environment sometimes. You live outside of DC. Go on a walk when the cherry blossoms are blooming, and like take a video with like the cherry blossoms like raining on you. Like that's such a cool time of year there. Why not?
It's awesome that you mentioned that, because the outdoor thing is really what got me to buy this gimbal. Because I actually watched Red Boswell take a video. I think he's out in Utah at the time. I could be wrong, but I know he was out west, but he's like hiking through a river, and he does this like 5-minute, monologue where he's, cameras on him. He's hiking through a river. I'd be falling, busting, on my butt left and right type of thing. But here he is clearly using a gimbal because he's perfectly straight the entire time. And he's able to like keep his thoughts while he's hiking through at the same time. And I would just have to say that I was wildly impressed by that. And it inspired me to go get the gimbal. But I love, great suggestion. I mean, shoot outside, shoot in your car. People like watching car videos too, like of people shooting in the car sometimes. I shot a video once where I was on one of those wheels, like the London Eye. Type of thing, like a big Ferris wheel, indoor Ferris wheel. But like I shot a video on that. We have a client over in DC who runs that at the National Harbor, runs the wheel, and we shot material up in there, and it was awesome. Like just kind of see, because I'd come around and you'd be seeing this little National Harbor area, but then as I'm going the other direction, you're seeing all like DC skyline kind of in the background, and not a huge skyline in DC. Everything's small in the Washington Monument, but you clearly know what you're looking at.
Yeah, so. I kind of love, that's a really cool area. I've been there for a couple of conferences, and I've never gotten on it, but I've been right by that Ferris wheel. So
that's an area that didn't even exist when I first moved here. So crazy.
Well, it's crazy though, but it's going back to the point though, right? Because we're getting into some creative ideas that are very tactical. That I think hopefully everyone, you've written a couple of notes down, because I think together we've at least come up with one coherent and good thought. But the idea here is create content that emulates what your ideal consumer is consuming. And if you don't think that your 50-year-old is watching TikTok videos and YouTube shorts and Instagram videos and stuff, then you're wrong. You're wrong. I don't even have TikTok on my phone. I'm not going to lie, but my kids share videos with me and I watch them on the web, and I'm like, oh, that's actually kind of funny.
That's
But
kind of funny.
but we all consume that content, and so start emulating it more. Don't be ridiculous. You don't need to be doing office dances together to train people, but you
Yeah.
can really leverage that style.
Well, and not only that, you can leverage the editing tool. So I will say this for any of the faults that TikTok has, they've got a killer authoring tool. I mean, if you want to create, like engaging videos and stuff like that, they've got an awesome authoring tool. And you can export those and put those in your training, materials if you wanted to. There's a lot of other, really cool authoring tools out there, and they don't cost a lot of money. They're not hard to learn how to use now. We've been leveraging this really cool tool called Luma One, and Luma One is an easy authoring tool. And why it's really slick is I can record my video in English telling let's say a franchisee how to open a store, how to greet a customer, whatever it is I'm teaching. Well, if I throw that into Luma One, it absorbs it, and then the AI creates the subtitles for it. And then the AI can read in those subtitles in English and convert those to Spanish or Mandarin or anything else. Then it can read in those subtitles and actually do a voiceover in that language as well.
Wow.
And
Huh.
so, it's important to create your initial video, but then you've got some of these other tools out there that can help you get it to the next level. And honestly, the level of effort to add a, Mandarin voiceover to my training video now takes a couple of minutes.
Mhm.
And that's something that used to be really expensive and really a big challenge. And I'm not saying that this covers all translations needed, by no means.
No, not at all.
Yeah. Our good buddy Kyle isn't ready for me to, say anything like that. And he's spot on. It's not even close. But if all you've got to do is really translate a course so that the employee who only understands French can understand it, it's a really easy way to do that. So yeah, leverage the new technology that's out for sure.
Oh yeah. Just a comment on that, because I lived for about 6 years in the localization industry. You've got to there are certain thresholds you need to meet for certain types of content, right? If you've got
Yeah.
HR, legal, regulatory content, forget about it. Don't even try to drop it into an AI engine. It's gonna machine translate and then machine create subtitles. That would be a liability for you. But there are things where hey guys, just want to say happy Friday. Boom, something that's cultural or just basic or just a follow up, a touch point. A lot of these things that you create, I totally agree. Or just some basic how-to stuff, but anything that's instructional is technical at all in nature, you're going to want to talk to someone like a Kyle at Transcend and get a professional to guide you. Some of them, the best part about Kyle, I feel like I'm giving him an ad here. He's going to be on the podcast that just came out right before this one, but it's
Link
just
it back.
if you find the right people, they're going to be honest with you about it. They're going to say, look, I don't need to do that project. Why don't we do this? Or why don't I run it through this machine? I'll charge you $50 instead of $1,500, and we'll just nothing nasty comes through the machine translation, right? If you want to know what I'm talking about, go to English.com and then just look at that, because you'll see thousands of examples of people that machine translated something, and it was sometimes not very good, not good at all.
And how many times have we seen people who decide to get a tattoo in another language have that go south?
Oh man, I wish I could wish I read script, script from India, because people have all these Hindu script on their arm. I don't think that means what you think it means.
Yeah, I don't think it does. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, and just to kind of piggyback on one thing that you said, which was, kind of talking about, there is a time to buy content as well.
Mhm.
I always talk about the 3 B's of content development. And I think you build what's unique to your brand, right? And that's what you have, subject matter expertise in. That's what's proprietary information. You build what's unique to your brand. I think you borrow things that are common in the industry. So go to YouTube for a hand washing video. Don't go create that yourself. And then you buy what you don't have expertise in. So if you need, if you've got a unit in California and they need sexual harassment for managers and employees in California that makes it through all California regulations, you don't have somebody on staff that has that expertise. So you buy that. So you build what's unique to you, you borrow the common ones, and then you buy the stuff that you don't have expertise in. And if you look at it that way, it can become a little less overwhelming about all the things you need to do to truly get your training program up and running.
Oh yeah, there is nothing wrong with curating content. I do it all the time. I should probably do more in internal training here at Client Tether, but maybe you and I had to talk about that. But There's content out there that's phenomenal. Like my
Yeah.
son, he gets on. He went through almost a whole year of like math and over the summer in Khan Academy. And
Yep.
kids are paying good money to go to K-12 and get almost the same content. They might even be porting that content in. Like I don't
They
know,
are.
but if you look, yeah, you probably know. But if you look at content for like workplace readiness, sexual harassment, like there's a lot of stuff out there that's actually common, shared, and aligned with industry standards. And someone's creating content to monetize the YouTube video channel.
Yeah.
I want it to be good. So we started a franchise and I was like, oh my gosh, I got to run payroll. And I haven't signed up for a PEO yet. I better figure out how to do it. And I watched like 15 minutes worth of YouTube videos, super high quality content. And I was like, wow,
Right.
I guess I'll run my payroll now. I know exactly what to do.
Yeah, I mean, there's amazing stuff on a lot of these channels like YouTube, right? I mean, we saw it a ton during COVID where we all figured out how to like fix our homes. Like, my furnace broke. Well, no one's coming out to fix that, so I got to go online and start watching videos. And you are absolutely right. Like these sites, I mean, there's an embed code. So you're on YouTube, right? And you can either link that right into your course content, or you can add the embed code and it just lives right inside of your, Learning Zen course that you create. And it's that Creative Commons licensing law that allows us to do these things. So as long as you're not necessarily using it to generate revenue, as long as you're not selling these people's, ideas,
Mhm.
you absolutely can, borrow as much content as available. And there's a ton that's out there. So only create what you have to build.
I love that. Let's talk about something because I want to talk about tech for a minute because you guys have a great platform. It's designed for franchising. It helps streamline this whole flow and like delivery and also accountability, measurement, stuff like the optics into what's actually being consumed. So you can make sure, hey, I asked you to do this. Did you do it? Kind of stuff. But let's say I'm an emerging brand and I don't have any budget for anything. I can't even afford Learning Zen, even though it's super affordable. So is it good enough to have a Google Doc, have a couple of embedded videos in there, and then maybe a couple of vidyards I shot myself and uploaded so I could host? Like, is that a good starting point? Like, where's like ground zero where someone can have an acceptable solution before they need to start spending money? A lot of people want to know that.
Yeah, I actually think that you brought up something that I think is a really great solution. If you don't have the money, the budget, to actually get into a learning management system, I think you can make do with the tools that you have. So your example, if you're a Google Shop and you've got a Google Drive, you absolutely can create documents. You can create forms. Actually, with Google Forms, you can actually create quizzes and exams even as well. But you actually can even have a private YouTube channel. So you could, go out there, create videos that are hosted on YouTube that are private. So really it's only your team that's going to get access to them. And that's true on Vimeo as well. And I'm sure there's lots, SlideShare, SlideBoom, there's all kinds of, tools out there to allow you to do that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
I think that's at the end of the day, Dave, I think you just have to do something. You can't do nothing, right? You can't just sit back and say, well, we've got manuals, because the manuals are going to end up in the employee's trunk, the circular file. They're not, whatever you're hoping for, they're not going to get read. It's not going to happen. And so I think you've got to have some sort of electronic way of delivering that and some sort of way that they can absorb it from anywhere at any time, because today's employees aren't necessarily working from 9 to 5. And they don't necessarily learn at a particular time. It might be 11 p.m. and they want to go in and take a training video. And if it's available to them, then, they can watch that and they can do that on their phone or an app or a tablet. It doesn't matter, but you've got to do something. Doing nothing will not work.
Yeah.
Giving them manuals, to read will not work. But if you give them some sort of electronic solution, now the only challenge you're going to have with like using a Google solution is really the tracking. It's measuring. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
you're going to be able to tell, right? I mean, you might see sales, peak up at a certain location. You might have better surveys and feedback coming in from some of your locations, but in order to really the big key with the LMS, right, is the measurement of that. And we can see, okay, is the information that we're teaching retaining? And then you almost have to overlay that learning data against profitability data to truly get a holistic approach of whether your franchise system is getting better trained or not.
Oh yeah.
But I think you can absolutely start for next to nothing by using those methods that you mentioned.
And that was my point, because I'm not in any way advocating for that. That's like saying, hey, I can get to work if I steal my 8-year-old's bicycle with the little like sparkly things off the handle, I can ride it 3.5 miles to the office. Like you can get there, right?
Yeah.
It's a functional thing. It has wheels, but this is like, I don't have any money at all. I got to start with something, then start with something. But
Start with
really, at
something.
the end of the day, like you're right, you're gonna have to make your own custom forms and force people to fill them out, and then you have to like analyze your own data and then put that into a chart and then figure out like LMSs do all that for you. And there are also better authoring tools that plug into them so you can snap stuff right in, structure so it's consistent, delivery mechanism, accountability. Like an LMS is the way to go, guys. If you've got more than a couple of units and a little bit of revenue coming in, like get a little bit of like save yourself the money and the hassle of trying to subdue everything on your own, and also watch your royalties and your revenues go up by getting something like this in place. It's a no-brainer to me, but some people are terrified of the expense up front because they just spent way too much money having somebody take them on a ride and build a couple of manuals for them. So they need to find a cheap way to get started. You just got to start.
Yeah, I always feel like as business owners, we've got a couple of decisions to make. And do I throw time at it or do I throw money at it?
Or people, which is money and time, right?
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people will, they'll absolutely throw time at it because at the end of the day, people do love being able to kind of control their own destiny. And so being able to, if you pay us to create all of your courses for you, you're going to pay us to edit all your courses for you probably. But if you come on to Learning Zen and we teach you how to be an author, you never have to pay us, for an edit. You never have to worry about making a change because something's outdated. You can kind of do all of those things yourself. And so we're teaching you kind of those tools, the tool set needed to create those good, engaging e-learning, courses. A lot like you mentioned, you can't just head out and fly fish without understanding what you're trying to catch. What do they prefer to eat? What is their hatch cycle? And if you want them to bite your fly, you need to have thought about all of those different things and what time of day and that kind of stuff. And do I want to bounce it off the bottom or lay it on top? And so
spot on. This is also a training. This is a training on how to go fly fishing too, guys. You didn't realize that, but you're getting a 2-for-1 today. So no, this is great. I mean, let's summarize a couple of key things for me, and then I'll let you wrap up if you don't mind, Douglas. One, you got to start with something. Don't have nothing. Don't give them a manual. If you're handing people a shrink wrapped operations manual or a 200-page PDF and saying congratulations, go get trained, then it's just not happening. Nobody consumes content like that anymore at all. Two, but you need to make your content align with, just like we were talking about, it's got to align with the consumer of your content, both in the style of the content, the tone of the content, the delivery mechanism of the content, and accessibility of the content. So make it so it's 24/7, 365 available on a mobile device. It's bottom line. You make it easy. And then the last thing is use. We didn't talk about this much, but we've kind of talked around it. Use as much video as you possibly can, as little written as you possibly can. If you transcripts, let the transcripts of the video do the talking if you need, but everyone consumes video now, and you can get so much more data crammed into a 90-second video than you can in a 5-page document. So my strong recommendation that I'll end on is just make sure you're using video. Use Loom. I use Vidyard for almost everything. It's so easy. I record on my phone, I upload it. It becomes a shareable video with a private link, and I can track how many people are watching it. Like, I love it. So Douglas, what else would you add to that as far as summary thoughts, things people need to take away from this?
Yeah, I think it's one we hear in our space a lot, which is, be authentic. When you create those courses, use your own people. If you're trying to teach someone about your company culture, then you're probably a leader at your business. So get in front of that camera and practice, get used to, sucking before you get pretty decent at it. But also design for today's learner. And I think that's an important one. Video plays a huge part in it, and that's what Dave was just talking about. But really, you really need to understand your learners. And so I think that starts with, doing some analysis of your learners, having a good idea of sort of what is the age range, how do they prefer to learn, and quite frankly, if they learn from watching TikTok style videos, then create TikTok style training. Give them what they need, give them what they want.
Yeah, seriously, because they'll consume it. At the end of the day, like, I could stock my fridge and my cabinet with like gluten-free, fat-free crackers, and I could stock the fridge with broccoli and cauliflower. And my kids would use their allowance, not their allowance, but their chore money, and they'd go down the street and they'd buy Burger King, right? So I'm not going to
Yeah.
feed my kids Burger King, but we can make homemade burgers. We can make
Right.
homemade food, like, but they're not going to consume geriatric food, prune juice. Like, come on. Like, sometimes I think that if our franchisees are opening our fridge, our training fridge, and they're looking inside, it's got a lot of prune juice and like moldy, crusty, old cantaloupe on the countertop. Like, we got to give them something that's engaging that they'll consume. And
Yeah.
yeah.
But one last thing is support. Like, so I feel like when learners get stuck, whether they're, reading on their own, or you're teaching them, or they're watching a video, if they get stuck, they give up. And so you've got to support your learning community. So if you see that, analysis will play a big part in this, but if they're only watching, 60 seconds of a 3-minute video, you need to find out why they aren't watching those other 2 minutes. And so you need to kind of support those learners as well. That's a big part of it.
Yeah, and be ready for a shot to the ego, because sometimes you'll find they're just getting fatigued from hearing from the founder all the time.
Yeah.
As much as we love you and you love yourselves, sometimes, like, not everyone wants to hear you talk all the time, or you're not delivering content in an exciting way. Or, I mean, I won't say any names here, but there was a guy that I knew that I've done some work for before, and he was making a whole video series to train people. And I watched his first videos and I was like, it's never going to work.
No.
You're boring. You're absolutely boring. And so you also got to be real about that. Use the data. If you're not self-aware, the data will help you become self-aware, but mix it up. Have your teams, have the front desk gal that's way more exciting and energetic than you are, do some content for you, because that's the first point of contact for your franchisees for support anyway, probably. So leverage the team. I love that you said that before. That's great advice.
Yeah, chances are that franchisee speaks to that contact, and it's actually, he or she is really going to resonate if they could see them also on video delivering it. I mean, what a great connection that makes for the next time that they call.
Yeah, let's wrap on this thought. You'd said, but you talked early on about the angst between franchisors and franchisees and the lack of culture. Sometimes it's not intentional. If you want to reinforce culture, if you want to establish more of an emotional connection between you and your franchisees that only see each other at conference once a year, put yourself in front of them in a format that feels like you're there sitting in front of them. Put video in front of them. Be in front of them with video, with audio, whatever you got. And those sorts of things will help them reconnect with you, and emotionally they remember the experiences they've had with you in person when they see you quasi in person on video. It's a really powerful connection. So don't underestimate it at all. Make sure you use it.
Well said.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, everybody.